The scorching Arizona sun beat down relentlessly as Penelope Norton hurried along the dusty trail toward Agua Caliente, her trunks and worldly possessions waiting at the stagecoach station. She was already late to meet her new employer, and the shortcut through the creek bed had seemed like such a sensible idea until the ground beneath her feet turned from solid to something terrifyingly unstable. It was 1876, and at 22, Penelope had traveled all the way from Philadelphia to take a position as a schoolteacher in the small but growing settlement of Agua Caliente. The town had sprung up around natural hot springs, drawing settlers seeking relief from various ailments and those simply looking for opportunity in the Arizona territory. Help. She called out, her voice thin with panic as she felt herself sinking inexorably into the seemingly innocent patch of wet sand. Is anyone there? Her expensive traveling boots, now ruined, disappeared beneath the surface as she tried to remain still, remembering vaguely something she'd once read about quicksand. The more one struggled, the faster one sank. The creek bed, dried up in most places due to the unseasonable drought, had become treacherous with pockets of quicksand where water still seeped underground. Penelope's heart hammered in her chest as the sand reached her knees, then her thighs. Her crinoline and petticoats were becoming saturated, dragging her down faster. "Hold on there, madam." A deep voice carried across the distance, and Penelope turned her head to see a tall figure on horseback approaching at a gallop. The rider dismounted with practiced ease, his boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his skin tanned from long days under the sun. A well-worn Stetson shaded eyes the color of the summer sky. "Don't move," he instructed, removing his hat and jacket. "The more you struggle, the faster you'll sink." "I've noticed," Penelope replied, trying to keep her voice steady despite her fear. The cowboy, assessed the situation quickly. "My name's Gabriel Addison," he said, uncoiling a rope from his saddle. "Ranch foreman at the Double R." "I'm going to get you out of there, Miss Norton." "Penelope Norton," she answered, watching as he fashioned a loop in the rope. Gabriel tossed the loop toward her with expert precision. "Put this around your waist, Miss Norton. I'll pull you free." Penelope caught the rope and secured it around her waist, trying not to shift too much. The quicksand had reached her hips now, and panic threatened to overwhelm her composure. "Ready?" Gabriel called, wrapping the rope around his powerful forearms. "Yes," she replied, gripping the rope tightly. "When I pull, lean back like you're sitting in a chair. It'll help break the suction." Penelope followed his instructions, and with Gabriel's steady pulling and her careful movements, she began to feel the quicksand releasing its grip. The process was slow and exhausting. Several times she felt herself slipping back, but Gabriel's strength never wavered. With a final heave, Penelope broke free from the quicksand's clutches and stumbled onto solid ground, covered in wet sand and mud. Without hesitation, Gabriel lifted her into his arms and carried her farther from the dangerous area. "Thank you," she gasped, suddenly aware of her disheveled appearance and the strong arms that held her. She'd never been held by a man who wasn't her father or brother, and the impropriety of it struck her even as she acknowledged the necessity. "You're welcome, Miss Norton," Gabriel replied, setting her down gently on dry ground near his horse. "What brings a lady like yourself to these parts?" "That accent tells me you're a long way from home." Penelope attempted to brush some of the mud from her ruined traveling dress. "I'm the new schoolteacher for Agua Caliente. I was taking a shortcut to town when, well, you saw what happened." A look of understanding crossed Gabriel's face. "Ah, you must be the Eastern lady Mr. Thompson's been talking about. The town's been waiting on you." "And now I'll arrive looking like this," Penelope said, gesturing to her mud-covered form. Gabriel chuckled, a warm sound that seemed to ease some of the tension from the air. "Folks around here understand the challenges of the territory. Besides, surviving quicksand on your first day gives you a story worth telling." He retrieved a canteen from his saddle and offered it to her. "Here, drink some water, then I'll take you into town." The water was cool and refreshing, washing away some of the grit from her mouth. "Thank you again, Mr. Addison. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." "Call me Gabe," he said, replacing his hat. "Most folks do." He looked toward his horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion. "Rusty here can carry us both to town. It's not far." Penelope hesitated. Riding double with a stranger, even one who had saved her life, was hardly proper. But her alternatives were limited, and her trunks were waiting at the stagecoach station. "I suppose that would be best," she agreed finally. Gabriel helped her onto the horse before swinging up behind her. The closeness was disconcerting, his chest solid against her back as he reached around her to take the reins. "Hold on," he instructed, and Penelope gripped the saddle horn, acutely aware of the impropriety of their position. As they rode toward Agua Caliente, Gabriel told her about the town and its inhabitants. The Double R Ranch where he worked was owned by Richard Reynolds, one of the area's most prosperous cattlemen. The town had grown from a small outpost to a respectable settlement with a general store, a hotel, several saloons, and now, with Penelope's arrival, a proper school. "Mr. Thompson, he's the mayor, has been pushing for a school for years," Gabriel explained. "Says a town can't grow proper without education." "And what do you think, Mr. Addison?" Penelope asked, curious about this man who had so unexpectedly entered her life. "Gabe," he reminded her, "and I think he's right. I didn't get much schooling myself, but I know the value of it. The children here deserve a chance at something better." The sincerity in his voice touched something in Penelope. She'd come west, seeking adventure and purpose, tired of the stifling confines of Philadelphia society. Her parents had been scandalized by her decision to accept a teaching position in such a wild place, but they hadn't understood her desire to make a difference. As they approached the town, Penelope could see the cluster of buildings that made up Agua Caliente. It was smaller than she'd imagined, but there was something charming about its frontier simplicity. People stopped to stare as Gabriel rode down the main street with Penelope perched in front of him. Her mud-covered appearance and their shared mount made quite a spectacle. Whispers followed them, and Penelope felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "Don't mind them," Gabriel murmured, seeming to sense her discomfort. "News travels fast in a small town. By tomorrow, they'll have something new to talk about." He brought the horse to a stop in front of a modest building with a sign reading Agua Caliente Hotel. As they dismounted, a portly man with spectacles hurried toward them. "Miss Norton." "We were beginning to worry when you didn't arrive with the stage," he exclaimed, taking in her appearance with wide eyes. "What in heaven's name happened?" Gabriel stepped forward. "She had a run-in with some quicksand out by Cottonwood Creek, Mr. Thompson. Lucky I was riding back from checking the east pasture fence line." The man, Mayor Thompson, Penelope presumed, looked horrified. "Quicksand, my dear lady, how dreadful. We should have sent someone to meet you at the stage." "I'm quite all right, thanks to Mr. Addison," Penelope assured him, attempting to stand with dignity despite her mud-caked clothing. "Gabriel Addison saving damsels in distress again," came a feminine voice, and Penelope turned to see a well-dressed woman approaching. Though her words seemed teasing, there was a sharpness to her tone that Penelope didn't miss. "Vera Reynolds," the woman introduced herself with a practiced smile. "My father owns the Double R Ranch where Gabe works." Penelope nodded politely, noting the way Vera's eyes lingered on Gabriel. There was clearly history there. "Miss Norton needs to rest and clean up," Gabriel said, apparently oblivious to Vera's attention. "Her trunks, already in her room," Mayor Thompson confirmed. "Mrs. Thompson prepared the teachers' quarters behind the schoolhouse, but perhaps the hotel would be better for tonight, considering." "The hotel will be fine," Penelope agreed quickly, longing for privacy and a bath. "Thank you all for your concern. I'll have Mrs. Bellamy prepare a hot bath for you right away," Mayor Thompson said, ushering her toward the hotel entrance. Penelope turned back to Gabriel. "Thank you again, Mr. Addison. I'm in your debt." Gabriel touched the brim of his hat. "Just doing what anyone would, Miss Norton." "Welcome to Agua Caliente." As he turned to leave, Vera fell into step beside him, her voice carrying back to Penelope. "Father's expecting you for dinner tonight, Gabe. Do say you'll come." Penelope watched them go, an unexpected twinge of something that couldn't possibly be jealousy stirring within her. She pushed the feeling aside as Mayor Thompson guided her into the hotel. She had a new life to begin, and Gabriel Addison was simply the man who had happened to save her from an unfortunate accident. Nothing more. The hot bath Mrs. Bellamy prepared was heavenly, washing away the mud and sand that seemed to have worked its way into every crevice. As Penelope soaked, she reflected on her first day in Arizona territory. It certainly hadn't gone as planned, but perhaps that was fitting for her new life on the frontier. The next morning, refreshed and properly attired in one of her sensible teaching dresses, Penelope met Mayor Thompson at breakfast to discuss her duties. The schoolhouse, he explained, had been completed just a month prior, and 28 children from the town and surrounding ranches were enrolled to begin lessons the following Monday. It's a mixed group, the mayor explained, ages 6 to 16. Some have had schooling before, others none at all. Their parents understand the importance of education, even if some of the children might be reluctant students. I'm prepared for the challenge, Penelope assured him. In Philadelphia, I taught children from various backgrounds. Yes, but these are frontier children, Mrs. Thompson interjected gently. She was a kind-faced woman with graying hair tucked neatly beneath a cap. Many have been working alongside their parents since they could walk. Book learning might seem unnecessary to them. Then I'll have to show them otherwise, Penelope replied with determination. After breakfast, the Thompsons took her to see the schoolhouse and the attached living quarters that would be her new home. The schoolhouse was simple but solidly built, with rows of wooden desks facing a larger desk and blackboard at the front. Large windows allowed plenty of light, and a pot-bellied stove stood ready for the cooler months. The living quarters consisted of a small parlor, bedroom, and kitchen, modest but comfortable. Mrs. Thompson had arranged wildflowers in a jar on the table, a welcoming touch that brought tears to Penelope's eyes. "It's perfect," she said sincerely. "Thank you for making me feel so welcome." "We're grateful to have you," Mayor Thompson replied. "Not many young ladies from the East would venture out to a place like Agua Caliente." As they were leaving, Penelope noticed a figure on horseback approaching. Her heart quickened as she recognized Gabriel Addison. He dismounted, removing his hat as he approached. "Morning, Mayor Mrs. Thompson, Miss Norton." His gaze lingered on Penelope. "Glad to see you recovered from yesterday's adventure." "Yes, thank you," Penelope replied, suddenly conscious of how her simple blue dress complimented her eyes. "Gabe's brought some of your trunks from the hotel," Mayor Thompson explained. "The rest will follow with the delivery wagon later." Gabriel carried the trunks inside with ease, setting them down in the bedroom as directed. Penelope noticed a fresh scratch on his forearm as he worked. "You're injured," she observed when they were momentarily alone. Gabriel glanced at his arm as if noticing the wound for the first time. Just caught myself on some barbed wire this morning. Hazard of the job." "Let me help," Penelope insisted, retrieving a small medical kit from one of her trunks. "It's the least I can do after you saved my life." Gabriel looked as though he might protest, but instead sat on the edge of a chair while Penelope cleaned the wound. His skin was warm beneath her fingers, calloused from hard work yet surprisingly gentle in its own way. "How do you like Agua Caliente so far?" he asked as she wrapped a clean bandage around his arm. "It seems lovely, though I've seen little beyond the Quicksand and the hotel," she admitted with a small smile. "I'm looking forward to exploring more." "It's a good place," Gabriel said. "Rough around the edges, but the people are decent, most of them anyway." "And the others?" Penelope asked, securing the bandage. A shadow crossed Gabriel's face. "Every place has its share of trouble. Agua Caliente is no different." Before she could ask more, Mayor Thompson returned. "All settled, Miss Norton, Mrs. Thompson and the Ladies' Aid Society are hosting a welcome gathering for you tomorrow afternoon at the church. It'll be a chance to meet the parents of your students." "That sounds wonderful," Penelope replied, stepping away from Gabriel with a sense that a moment had been interrupted. Gabriel replaced his hat. "I should get back to the ranch. Mr. Reynolds is moving cattle to the north pasture today." As he turned to leave, he paused. "Miss Norton, if you'd like to see more of the area, I'd be happy to show you around on Sunday after church. There are some views worth seeing." The invitation caught Penelope by surprise. "That would be very kind, Mr. Addison. Thank you," After Gabriel left, Mrs. Thompson helped Penelope unpack her books and teaching materials. "Gabriel Addison is a good man," the older woman commented casually. "Came here 5 years ago with nothing but the clothes on his back and a talent with horses. Now he's foreman at the biggest ranch in the territory. He seems very capable," Penelope agreed, trying to sound neutral. Mrs. Thompson's eyes twinkled knowingly. "Half the unmarried women in town have set their caps for him, but he keeps to himself mostly. Works hard, goes to church on Sundays, and doesn't frequent the saloons like some of the other ranch hands. And Miss Reynolds," Penelope found herself asking before she could stop the words. "Vera." Mrs. Thompson arranged Penelope's books on a shelf. "She's been sweet on Gabriel for years, but he treats her like a sister. Richard Reynolds would like nothing better than to have Gabriel as a son-in-law, but the heart wants what it wants." Penelope nodded, filing away this information. Not that it mattered to her, of course. She'd come to Agua Caliente to teach, not to pursue romance. Her fiancé's betrayal in Philadelphia had taught her the danger of entrusting her heart too easily. The welcome gathering at the church was a lively affair, with seemingly the entire town turning out to meet the new schoolteacher. Penelope was introduced to so many people that the names and faces began to blur together, though she did her best to remember the parents of her future students. Gabriel arrived late, standing at the back of the gathering with several other ranch hands. Penelope found herself glancing his way more often than she should, noting how he stood apart from the others, somehow not aloof, but self-contained in a way that drew attention. Vera Reynolds stayed close to Gabriel's side, occasionally touching his arm as she spoke to him. The woman was undeniably beautiful in an elaborate green dress that highlighted her figure, her dark hair arranged fashionably. Next to her, Penelope felt plain in her simple blue dress with her honey blonde hair arranged in a practical chignon. After most of the introductions had been made, Penelope found a quiet moment to step outside the church for some fresh air. The day was cooling into evening, the desert landscape painted in golds and purples by the setting sun. "Overwhelming, isn't it?" came Gabriel's voice from beside her, making her start. "Sorry, didn't mean to frighten you." "You move very quietly for such a large man," Penelope observed, her hand on her heart. Gabriel smiled, and Penelope noticed how it transformed his face, softening the lines around his eyes. "Comes from years of not wanting to spook the cattle or the horses. It's a useful skill, I suppose." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the sunset. "Are you still amenable to that tour tomorrow?" Gabriel asked finally. "I thought we might ride out to Sentinel Peak. The view of the valley is something special." "I'd like that," Penelope replied. "Though I should warn you, I'm not much of a rider." Gabriel's eyes crinkled with amusement. "We'll find you a gentle mount, and I promise to steer clear of any quicksand." The joke surprised a laugh out of her, and Penelope realized it was the first time she'd truly laughed since arriving in Agua Caliente. "There you are, Gabe," Vera's voice interrupted from the church doorway. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she took in their proximity. "Father's ready to leave." Gabriel nodded. "I'll be right there." Turning back to Penelope, he touched the brim of his hat. "Until tomorrow, Miss Norton, I'll come by around noon if that suits." "That would be fine, Mr. Addison." As Gabriel walked away with Vera, whose hand had somehow found its way to his arm again, Penelope wondered what she was doing. Getting involved with anyone, especially so soon after arriving, had not been part of her plan. Yet there was something about Gabriel Addison that intrigued her. It wasn't just his handsome face or the way he'd rescued her, though neither hurt. There was a depth to him, a quiet strength that seemed to promise reliability in a world where Penelope had found little of it. Sunday dawned clear and warm. Penelope attended the morning church service, where Reverend Clark preached a sermon on new beginnings that seemed particularly appropriate. Gabriel sat several pews behind her with the Reynolds family, and Penelope resisted the urge to look back at him. After the service, she returned to her quarters to change into a riding outfit she'd purchased in Philadelphia specifically for her new life in the West. The split skirt had scandalized her mother, but Penelope found it eminently practical as she prepared for her outing. Gabriel arrived precisely at noon, leading 2 horses, his chestnut stallion and a gentle-looking Palomino mare. "This is Buttercup," he introduced the mare. "She belongs to Mr. Reynolds's youngest daughter, but she's agreed to lend her to you. Buttercup's steady and even-tempered." "She's beautiful," Penelope said, approaching the horse carefully and offering her palm for the mare to sniff. Buttercup nuzzled her hand affectionately. "She likes you," Gabriel observed. "That's a good sign." With Gabriel's help, Penelope mounted the mare. Her riding lessons in Philadelphia had been limited to side saddle on manicured paths, a far cry from the wild terrain of Arizona Territory, but she was determined to adapt. They rode at a leisurely pace, Gabriel pointing out landmarks and sharing stories about the area. Penelope found herself relaxing in his company, charmed by his knowledge and the obvious love he had for this harsh but beautiful land. "How did you come to Agua Caliente?" she asked as they paused to let the horses drink from a small stream. Gabriel's expression grew distant. "I was looking for a fresh start, rode into town with nothing much to my name except Rusty here and a desire to work hard. Mr. Reynolds took a chance on me, hired me as a ranch hand, worked my way up to foreman over the years." "And before that," Penelope pressed gently. Gabriel hesitated, and for a moment Penelope thought he wouldn't answer. "I was a soldier," he said finally. "Fought for the Union in the war. After that, I drifted for a while, did whatever work I could find. Nothing seemed to fit until I came here." The pain in his voice when he mentioned the war told Penelope there were wounds there that hadn't fully healed, but she didn't push further. Everyone had parts of their past they preferred not to discuss. She certainly did. "And you?" Gabriel asked, clearly wanting to change the subject. "What brings a Philadelphia lady all the way to Arizona Territory to teach in a frontier town?" Penelope considered how much to share. "I wanted something different," she said simply. "An opportunity to be useful where it truly matters." Gabriel studied her face, and Penelope had the distinct impression he knew there was more to the story. "Well, we're glad to have you, whatever your reasons." They continued their ride, ascending the winding trail that led to Sentinel Peak. The path grew steeper, and Penelope was grateful for Buttercup's sure footing. Gabriel rode slightly ahead, occasionally glancing back to ensure she was managing. When they reached the summit, Penelope gasped at the view. The valley stretched out below them, the town of Agua Caliente, a small collection of buildings nestled against the backdrop of mountains. The creek wound like a silver ribbon through the landscape, and in the distance, cattle dotted the grasslands of what must be the Double R Ranch. "It's magnificent," she breathed. Gabriel dismounted and helped her down from Buttercup. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary, and Penelope felt a rush of warmth that had nothing to do with the sun. "This is my thinking spot," Gabriel confessed as they stood side by side, looking out over the valley. "When things get complicated down there, I come up here to remind myself of the bigger picture." "And does it help?" Penelope asked. Gabriel nodded. "Most times. Helps to remember we're all just small parts of something larger." They shared a simple lunch of bread, cheese, and dried fruit that Gabriel had packed. The conversation flowed easily between them, moving from Gabriel's work at the ranch to Penelope's plans for the school. "Most of these children haven't had consistent schooling," Gabriel explained. "The last teacher left after 3 months, said the children were unmanageable. I'm not easily intimidated," Penelope assured him. "In Philadelphia, I taught in a charity school where many of the children came from difficult circumstances." "What made you leave that behind?" Gabriel asked, his blue eyes intent on her face. Penelope looked away, focusing on the distant mountains. It was time for a change. Gabriel seemed to sense her reluctance to elaborate. "Well, the children here are good kids at heart, just spirited. Like their teacher," Penelope said with a small smile. "I may look proper, Mr. Addison, but I assure you I can be quite spirited when necessary." "I don't doubt that for a moment, Miss Norton," he replied, his own smile warming his features. "Not for a moment." As the afternoon waned, they packed up their things and prepared to return to town. The ride down was as pleasant as the journey up, with Gabriel sharing more stories about the area and its inhabitants. "The hot springs are what brought people here initially," he explained as they rode past a steaming pool surrounded by rocks. Some say they have healing properties. Do you believe that? Penelope asked. Gabriel shrugged. I've seen men with aching joints find relief in those waters, whether it's the minerals or just the heat, who can say? But there's something to it. As they approached Agua Caliente, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in vivid oranges and pinks. Penelope was reluctant for the day to end, having enjoyed Gabriel's company more than she'd anticipated. "Thank you for today," she said as they reached her quarters behind the schoolhouse. It was lovely to see more of the area. Gabriel helped her dismount, his hands strong and sure at her waist. "The pleasure was mine, Miss Norton." Their eyes met and held for a long moment. Penelope felt something shift between them, a recognition of mutual interest that both thrilled and frightened her. Before either could speak again, the sound of approaching horses broke the moment. 4 riders came down the main street, dust rising from their horses' hooves. They were rough-looking men, their clothing travel-stained, their expressions hard. Gabriel's posture changed instantly, his body tensing as he moved slightly in front of Penelope. "Get inside," he said quietly, his voice having lost all its earlier warmth. "Who are they?" Penelope asked, not moving. "Trouble," Gabriel replied shortly. "Please go inside and lock the door." The urgency in his tone convinced her, and Penelope retreated to her quarters, but she watched through the window as Gabriel led the horses to the side of the building, keeping them out of direct view from the street. The riders slowed as they passed, one of them calling out something Penelope couldn't hear. Gabriel's response was equally inaudible, but his stance remained defensive, one hand resting near the gun at his hip. After what felt like an eternity, the riders moved on, continuing through town toward the saloon at the far end. Only then did Gabriel approach her door, knocking softly. When Penelope opened it, his expression was grim. "Are you all right?" she asked immediately. "I should be asking you that," he replied. "I'm sorry our day ended this way." "Who were those men?" Gabriel hesitated. "They call themselves the Corrigan brothers, though I doubt they're actually related. They're troublemakers, rustlers, mostly, though they've been known to rob stage coaches when the opportunity arises." "And they're allowed to just ride into town?" Penelope asked, shocked. "The sheriff can't arrest them without proof," Gabriel explained. "And witnesses have a way of disappearing or changing their stories when the Corrigans are involved." His jaw tightened. "They shouldn't be here long. They usually come in, spend their ill-gotten gains at the saloon, and move on." Penelope shivered despite the warmth of the evening. "Should I be worried?" "No," Gabriel said firmly. "They won't bother someone like you, and I'll make sure someone keeps an eye on the schoolhouse tonight just in case." The protective edge in his voice touched Penelope deeply. "Thank you," Gabriel smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I should get these horses back to the ranch." "Lock your door, Miss Norton." "Penelope," she said impulsively. "After today, I think you could call me Penelope." His smile softened into something more genuine. "Penelope," he repeated, the name sounding different in his deep voice. "Then you must call me Gabriel, or Gabe if you prefer." "Gabriel," she decided. The more formal name suited him better somehow. He touched the brim of his hat. "Good night, Penelope. I'll see you soon." As she watched him lead the horses away, Penelope realized how quickly this man was becoming important to her. It was too soon, she barely knew him, and yet she couldn't deny the connection forming between them. Resolutely, she locked her door and began preparing for her first day of school the following morning. Whatever her feelings for Gabriel Addison, she had a job to do in Agua Caliente. That had to be her priority. The schoolhouse filled with children early Monday morning, their curious faces regarding Penelope with varying degrees of interest and skepticism. There were indeed 28 students, ranging from 6-year-old Tommy Wilson, who could barely sit still on his bench, to 16-year-old Sarah Jenkins, whose world-weary expression suggested she considered herself far too grown for school. "Good morning," Penelope began, her voice clear and confident. "I'm Miss Norton, and I'm very pleased to be your teacher." A few murmurs of good morning responded, while others simply stared. "Before we begin with our lessons, I'd like to learn a bit about each of you," Penelope continued. "Your names, your ages, and perhaps one thing you enjoy doing." The introductions proceeded, some children eager to share, others reluctant. Penelope noted that several of the older boys glanced frequently toward the windows, clearly wishing to be elsewhere. Among them was 13-year-old James Reynolds, Vera's youngest brother, Penelope realized. The boy had Gabriel's same easy confidence but none of his warmth. "I'm James Reynolds," he announced when his turn came, "and I'd rather be helping at the ranch than sitting in a schoolhouse." Several of the other boys nodded in agreement. "I understand," Penelope replied calmly. "Ranch work is important, but so is education. Mr. Addison works at your father's ranch, doesn't he? Did you know he values education highly?" James looked surprised. "Gabe. He doesn't need book learning to be the best horseman in the territory." "Perhaps not," Penelope agreed. "But I suspect there's more to Mr. Addison than just his horsemanship, and there's more to each of you as well." The mention of Gabriel seemed to have captured the children's attention, and Penelope used the opportunity to transition into her first lesson. By lunchtime, even the most reluctant students had participated at least minimally, and Penelope counted the morning a modest success. As the children ate their lunches outside under the large cottonwood tree that provided shade for the schoolyard, Mayor Thompson stopped by to check on Penelope's first day. "They seem to be behaving themselves," he observed, watching the children at play. "They're testing me, of course," Penelope replied with a smile, "but I expected that. The Reynolds boy can be a handful," the mayor warned. "Takes after his sister in that regard, used to getting his own way." "He's bright," Penelope said. "They all are in their own ways. I just need to find what motivates each of them." Mayor Thompson nodded approvingly. "You have a good approach, Miss Norton. I think you'll do well here." As the mayor left, Penelope noticed a rider approaching Gabriel, leading a pack horse laden with supplies. Her heart quickened at the sight of him, and she chided herself for the reaction. The children noticed him too, several of the boys running to greet him. Gabriel dismounted, taking time to speak with each child, ruffling hair and answering questions with easy patience. When he reached Penelope, his smile was warm. "Miss Norton, how goes the first day?" "Quite well, thank you, Mr. Addison," she replied formally, aware of the children watching them. "I've brought some supplies for the school," Gabriel explained, gesturing to the pack horse. Mr. Reynolds donated paper and pencils and some books from his library that he thought might be useful. "That's very generous," Penelope said, genuinely touched by the gesture. Gabriel's eyes held hers. "He believes in what you're doing here, as do I." Together they unloaded the supplies, the children eagerly helping to carry books and materials into the schoolhouse. Penelope noticed how naturally Gabriel interacted with the children, firm but kind, expecting their help but making it feel like a privilege rather than a chore. "You're good with them," she observed as they finished. Gabriel shrugged. "They're good kids, even James, though he's at that age where he's trying to figure out what kind of man he wants to be." "And what kind would that be?" Penelope asked. "That's for him to decide," Gabriel replied. "But having someone like you to guide all of them will help." The compliment warmed Penelope more than it should have. "Thank you for the supplies. They'll be put to good use." Gabriel nodded, then lowered his voice. "About yesterday, the Corrigans left town this morning. Headed west, according to Sheriff Daniels." Relief washed through Penelope. "That's good to know. Still, be careful," Gabriel advised. "They have a way of turning up when least expected." With that warning, he took his leave, the children waving goodbye as he rode away. Penelope watched him go, a mixture of emotions stirring within her. The weeks that followed fell into a pleasant routine. Penelope's days were filled with teaching, while her evenings were spent preparing lessons and gradually becoming part of the Agua Caliente community. She joined the Ladies' Aid Society, helped with Sunday school, and even began teaching a few adults to read in the evenings. Gabriel was often present at community gatherings, and they developed a friendship that Penelope treasured, even as she found herself wishing for something more. Their conversations were easy, their shared interests in books and ideas creating a bond that deepened with each encounter. Yet, there was always Vera Reynolds hovering nearby, her possessive attitude toward Gabriel becoming increasingly obvious. Penelope tried to ignore the woman's thinly veiled hostility, reminding herself that she had no claim on Gabriel's affections. One evening in late October, a harvest festival was held in the town square. Tables laden with food lined the edges of the space, while musicians played lively tunes for dancing. Lanterns hung from ropes strung between buildings, casting a golden glow over the festivities. Penelope wore her best dress for the occasion, a deep burgundy that complemented her fair coloring. She had left her hair in a looser style than usual, with soft curls framing her face. "You look beautiful," came Gabriel's voice from behind her as she served herself from the dessert table. Turning, Penelope found him watching her with undisguised appreciation. He had cleaned up for the festival, his usual work clothes replaced by a crisp white shirt and dark vest that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. "Thank you," she replied, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. "You look rather handsome yourself." A slow smile spread across his face. "High praise from a lady such as yourself." Before they could continue their conversation, the musicians began a new song, and Gabriel's expression brightened. "I believe this is a waltz. Would you do me the honor, Miss Norton?" Penelope hesitated only briefly, before placing her hand in his outstretched one. "I'd be delighted, Mr. Addison." As Gabriel led her onto the makeshift dance floor, Penelope was acutely aware of the eyes following them, particularly Vera's narrowed gaze from where she stood with her father. But as Gabriel's arm encircled her waist, and they began to move in time with the music, Penelope found it increasingly difficult to care what others thought. Gabriel was a surprisingly graceful dancer for such a large man, guiding her confidently through the steps of the waltz. Their bodies moved in harmony, closer than propriety strictly allowed, but not scandalously so. "Where did you learn to dance like this?" Penelope asked, curious about this new facet of him. A shadow crossed Gabriel's face briefly. "Before the war, I attended a few society functions back east." "Seems some skills you don't forget." Before Penelope could inquire further about this glimpse into his past, the music ended, and they were required by politeness to separate. Gabriel's hand lingered on hers a moment longer than necessary, his eyes conveying something words could not. The moment was broken by Richard Reynolds approaching with Vera on his arm. "Addison, just the man I wanted to see. That new stallion is giving the hands trouble. Think you could take a look first thing tomorrow?" "Of course, sir," Gabriel replied, shifting smoothly into his role as foreman. "Miss Norton," Mr. Reynolds acknowledged with a nod. "I hear you're working wonders with the children. Even my James seems to be developing an interest in his studies." "He's a bright boy," Penelope replied. Once he realized learning could be practical as well as theoretical, he became quite engaged. Vera's laugh was like the tinkling of glass, pretty but with sharp edges. "James has always been impulsive, much like someone else I know." Her gaze slid meaningfully to Gabriel. An awkward silence followed, broken by the musicians starting another tune. "Father, they're playing our song," Vera exclaimed, tugging at Mr. Reynolds's arm. "You promised me a dance." As they moved away, Gabriel turned back to Penelope with an apologetic expression. "Would you like to take a walk? It's getting rather warm in here." The night air was cool and refreshing after the crowded dance floor. They strolled along the main street, now quiet except for the music and laughter drifting from the festival. "You've changed this town," Gabriel said suddenly. "In just a few months, you've made a difference." Penelope looked at him in surprise. "I've only done my job," Gabriel shook his head. "It's more than that. The children are engaged, parents are taking an interest in education, even some of the ranch hands are asking about your adult reading classes." "That's gratifying to hear," Penelope admitted. "I wanted to be useful here." They had reached the schoolhouse, its darkened windows a familiar and welcome sight to Penelope now. Gabriel stopped, turning to face her in the moonlight. "Penelope," he began, his voice soft but serious, "I need to tell you something." Her heart quickened. "Yes." Before he could continue, the sound of running footsteps interrupted them. A young boy, one of Penelope's students, came racing down the street. "Mr. Addison, Miss Norton," he called breathlessly. "Come quick, there's a fight at the festival, it's the Corrigans." Gabriel's expression hardened instantly. "Stay here," he told Penelope. "No," she replied firmly. "If my students are at risk, I'm coming with you." He looked as though he might argue, but instead nodded curtly. "Stay behind me." They hurried back toward the town square, the sounds of a disturbance growing louder as they approached. When they reached the festival, chaos had erupted. Tables were overturned, food scattered across the ground. In the center of the square, 4 men, the Corrigan brothers, were engaged in a brawl with several townspeople, including Sheriff Daniels. Gabriel assessed the situation quickly. "Get the children away," he instructed Penelope before striding into the fray. Penelope didn't hesitate, gathering as many children as she could find and directing them toward the church, where several women were already taking shelter. Mrs. Thompson helped her, her usually serene face tight with worry. "Those dreadful men," she muttered as they hurried the children along. They rode in during the dancing, already drunk and looking for trouble. Once the children were safely inside the church, Penelope couldn't resist returning to the square to see what was happening. The fight had escalated, with more men involved now. Gabriel was grappling with the largest of the Corrigans, a bear of a man with a wild beard and vicious eyes. As Penelope watched in horror, the man drew a knife, slashing toward Gabriel's face. Gabriel dodged, but not quickly enough to avoid a cut along his cheekbone. Blood streamed down his face, but he remained focused, landing a powerful punch that sent his opponent staggering backward. Sheriff Daniels and several other men had managed to subdue 2 of the other Corrigans, but the 4th was making his way toward the tethered horses, clearly intending to escape. Without thinking, Penelope moved to block his path. "Stop right there," she commanded in her sternest teacher voice. The man skidded to a halt, surprised to find a woman in his way. He was younger than the others, perhaps only 20, with the same hard eyes but less weathered features. "Move aside, lady," he growled. "I don't want to hurt you." "You've done enough damage tonight," Penelope replied, standing her ground. "Surrender to the sheriff." The young Corrigan's face twisted with anger. "I said move." He lunged forward, grabbing Penelope's arm roughly. What happened next occurred so quickly that Penelope could barely process it. One moment the Corrigan was gripping her arm painfully, the next he was on the ground, Gabriel standing over him with fury etched into every line of his face. "Don't touch her," Gabriel said, his voice low and dangerous. He hauled the young man to his feet and marched him toward the sheriff, who had now subdued the other Corrigans with help from the townspeople. Once the outlaws were secured and being led to the jail, Gabriel returned to Penelope's side, his expression still tense. Blood continued to trickle from the cut on his cheek, and Penelope reached up instinctively to wipe it away with her handkerchief. "You're hurt," she said softly. "It's nothing," Gabriel replied, his eyes searching hers. "Are you all right? Did he harm you?" "I'm fine," Penelope assured him. "Just a bit shaken." Gabriel's hand came up to cover hers where it rested against his cheek. "What were you thinking, confronting him like that? He could have killed you." The concern in his voice warmed her even as she recognized the rebuke. "I couldn't let him escape after what they'd done." "Your courage is admirable, but please," Gabriel's voice caught, "be more careful with your safety. This town needs you. The children need you." He paused, his eyes intense. "I need you." The admission hung in the air between them, fraught with meaning. "Gabriel," Penelope began, but they were interrupted once again, this time by Vera rushing toward them. "Gabe, you're injured," Vera exclaimed, pushing between them and taking Gabriel's face in her hands. "We need to get you to Dr. Morris right away." Gabriel gently removed Vera's hands. "It's just a scratch, Vera, nothing serious." "Nonsense," she insisted. "Father is bringing the wagon around. We're taking you back to the ranch where you can be properly cared for." Penelope stepped back, suddenly feeling like an intruder. "Miss Reynolds is right, Gabriel. You should have that cut looked at." Gabriel's eyes found hers over Vera's shoulder, filled with things unsaid. "We'll continue our conversation another time, Miss Norton." "Yes," Penelope agreed quietly. "Another time." As Gabriel was led away by a fussing Vera, Penelope felt a profound sense of loss. Whatever he had been about to tell her before the interruption remained a mystery, and she couldn't help wondering if the moment had passed forever. The aftermath of the festival brawl kept the town buzzing with gossip for days. The Corrigan brothers were locked in the town jail awaiting transfer to Tucson, where they would face trial for various crimes. Sheriff Daniels had deputized several men to ensure there would be no escape attempts. Penelope threw herself into her teaching, using the incident as an opportunity to discuss law, justice, and the consequences of actions with her older students. She saw little of Gabriel during this time, as he was busy at the Double R Ranch preparing for the winter months ahead. November brought cooler temperatures to Agua Caliente, and Penelope found herself enjoying the change of seasons. The desert took on different colors, the harsh summer heat giving way to more moderate days and chilly nights. One Friday afternoon, as school was dismissing, Penelope was surprised to see Gabriel waiting outside, Rusty's reins in hand. The cut on his cheek had healed into a thin white line that somehow added to his rugged appeal. "Mr. Addison," she greeted him, conscious of the children watching with interest. "This is an unexpected pleasure." "Miss Norton," he replied with a tip of his hat. "I wondered if I might have a word with you." The children dispersed, some casting curious glances back at their teacher and the ranch foreman. Once they were alone, Gabriel's formal demeanor relaxed. "I've missed our conversations," he admitted. "The ranch has kept me busy, but I find myself thinking of you often." The directness of his statement caught Penelope off guard. "I've thought of you as well," she confessed. Gabriel smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. "I'm glad to hear it. I was wondering if you might join me for dinner tomorrow evening at the hotel restaurant." "I have something I'd like to discuss with you." Penelope's heart fluttered. "I'd be delighted." "Good," Gabriel said, looking relieved. "I'll call for you at 6 if that's convenient. 6 would be perfect." As Gabriel mounted Rusty and rode away, Penelope couldn't help but wonder what he wanted to discuss. Her rational mind told her not to get her hopes up, but her heart had other ideas. The following evening, Penelope took special care with her appearance, selecting a deep blue dress that she had yet to wear in Agua Caliente. She arranged her hair in a style more elaborate than her usual teaching chignon, and even added a touch of perfume, a luxury she rarely indulged in. Gabriel arrived promptly at 6, looking more polished than Penelope had ever seen him. He had traded his work clothes for a well-tailored suit, and his usually windswept hair was neatly combed. "You look beautiful," he said when she opened the door, his eyes appreciative. "Thank you," Penelope replied, taking in his transformed appearance. "You look quite handsome yourself." The hotel restaurant was the finest establishment in Agua Caliente, which wasn't saying much compared to Philadelphia standards, but Penelope found she preferred its unpretentious charm. Gabriel had reserved a table in a quiet corner, away from the curious eyes of other diners. Their conversation over dinner flowed easily, as it always did. They discussed books they had both read, Gabriel's work at the ranch, Penelope's progress with her students, and their shared observations about life in Agua Caliente. It was only as dessert was served that Gabriel's manner became more serious. "Penelope," he began, setting down his fork, "there's something I need to tell you." "Yes," she prompted. When he hesitated, Gabriel took a deep breath. "Before I came to Agua Caliente, I was not the man I am now. The war changed me as it changed many men. Afterward, I was angry, lost. I did things I'm not proud of." Penelope listened silently, giving him space to continue. "I drifted from place to place, taking whatever work I could find, drinking too much, fighting too often. It wasn't until I came here, until Mr. Reynolds gave me a chance, that I started to find my way back to the man I once was, or perhaps to become someone new entirely." "Why are you telling me this?" Penelope asked gently. Gabriel's eyes met hers directly. "Because I care for you, Penelope. More than I should, perhaps, and before I allow myself to care anymore, you deserve to know the truth about me." Penelope reached across the table to place her hand over his. "We all have pasts, Gabriel. What matters is who you are now." "And who I am now is a man who has fallen in love with you," Gabriel said quietly, turning his hand to clasp hers. "I didn't expect it. I certainly didn't plan for it, but it happened all the same." Penelope's heart soared at his words. "I love you too," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think I have since you pulled me from that quicksand." Gabriel's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "I was hoping you might say that." He rose from his chair, still holding her hand, and to Penelope's astonishment, knelt beside her table. From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. "This is sudden, I know," he said, his voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. But when you know something is right, why wait? Penelope Norton, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? The restaurant had gone silent, all eyes on them, but Penelope barely noticed. In that moment, only Gabriel existed, his blue eyes gazing up at her with hope and love. Yes, she said, her voice clear and sure. Yes, I will marry you, Gabriel Addison. He opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant ring, a small diamond set in gold. As he slipped it onto her finger, applause broke out around them, the other diners caught up in the romantic moment. Gabriel returned to his seat, his face alight with joy. I had a whole speech prepared, he admitted with a laugh. About how you brought light into my life, how you make me want to be a better man, but it all flew out of my head the moment I looked into your eyes. You don't need speeches, Penelope assured him, admiring the ring on her finger. Your actions have always spoken clearly enough. As they left the restaurant, congratulations following them from the other diners, Gabriel explained his plans. I've been saving to buy a small ranch of my own, he said as they walked slowly back toward Penelope's quarters. It's not much compared to the Double R, but it's good land with a solid house. With your teaching salary and what I earn as foreman, we could make it work while I build up the ranch. It sounds perfect, Penelope replied, her heart full. When shall we be married? How does Christmas sound? Gabriel suggested. It gives us a month to prepare and the school will be on holiday. Christmas, Penelope repeated, loving the idea of beginning their life together during the season of hope and renewal. When they reached her door, Gabriel took both her hands in his. Are you sure about this? It won't be an easy life, being a rancher's wife. I didn't come west looking for an easy life, Penelope reminded him. I came looking for purpose, for meaning. I've found that in my teaching, and now I've found it with you as well. Gabriel drew her close, his arms encircling her waist. May I kiss you, Miss Norton? As your betrothed, I believe it would be proper. I believe it would, Penelope agreed, her heart racing as Gabriel's face lowered to hers. His lips were gentle at first, then more insistent as Penelope responded to his embrace. It was her first real kiss. The awkward fumbling of her former fiancé hardly counted, and it awakened feelings she had never experienced before. When they finally parted, both breathing quickly, Gabriel's eyes were darker than usual. I should go, he said reluctantly. Before I forget what's proper entirely, Penelope nodded, though she was tempted to invite him to stay longer. Will you come to church with me tomorrow? We can announce our engagement. I'll be here at 10, Gabriel promised, placing a final, chaste kiss on her forehead before taking his leave. Penelope watched him go, touching her lips in wonder. Her life had changed completely in the span of an evening, and yet it felt as natural as breathing. She had come to Arizona territory seeking a new beginning, never imagining she would find love as well. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Agua Caliente. Most of the town was delighted, particularly the children, who had observed the growing attraction between their teacher and the well-liked ranch foreman. Not everyone was pleased, however. Vera Reynolds made her displeasure known in subtle and not so subtle ways, from cold shoulders at church functions to pointed remarks about the difficulties of ranch life for someone not raised to it. To Penelope's relief, Richard Reynolds did not share his daughter's reservations. He congratulated them warmly and even offered Gabriel a generous wedding gift, the deed to a small parcel of land adjoining the property Gabriel had been saving to buy. You've been like a son to me these past years, Mr. Reynolds told Gabriel when presenting the gift. This is long overdue. With this addition, Gabriel's modest ranch became a viable operation, large enough to support a family and with room to grow. He continued his duties as foreman at the Double R while working on improvements to their future home whenever time permitted. Penelope helped where she could, riding out to the ranch on weekends to assist with painting the interior of the house and planting a small kitchen garden. It was during one of these visits, 2 weeks before their wedding, that Penelope finally learned the full story of Gabriel's past. They were sitting on the porch of what would soon be their home, watching the sunset paint the desert in golds and purples. Gabriel had been quiet all afternoon, and Penelope sensed there was something on his mind. What is it? She asked gently, taking his hand. You've hardly said a word since lunch, Gabriel sighed, his eyes on the distant horizon. I received a letter today from back east. Penelope waited, giving him space to continue in his own time. Before the war I was engaged, he said finally. Her name was Elizabeth. Her father was a business associate of my father's. I come from money, Penelope. Or I did once. This was a surprise, though it explained Gabriel's occasional glimpses of education and refinement that seemed at odds with his cowboy persona. The Addisons of Boston were well respected in society, Gabriel continued. Banking, primarily. I was expected to join the family business after college, marry Elizabeth, and carry on the Addison legacy. What happened? Penelope asked. The war, Gabriel replied simply. I enlisted, believing like many young men that it would be a grand adventure, that we'd put down the rebellion in a matter of months. My father was against it, not because he supported the Confederacy, but because he thought it beneath an Addison to serve as a common soldier. Gabriel's face darkened with the memory. I went anyway, saw things no man should see, did things no man should have to do. When I came home on leave halfway through, I was changed. Elizabeth didn't recognize the man I'd become, or perhaps she did, and that was the problem. Penelope squeezed his hand encouragingly. She broke our engagement, Gabriel said. Politely, of course, a letter expressing regret that circumstances had changed, wishing me well in my future endeavors. I'm sorry, Penelope said softly. Gabriel shook his head. Don't be. It was for the best, though it didn't feel like it at the time. When I returned after the war ended, my father and I quarreled. He wanted me to put it all behind me, to step into my role at the bank as if nothing had changed. I couldn't do it. I left Boston with nothing but the clothes on my back and what little money I had saved. He paused, his expression distant. I drifted for years, working odd jobs, drinking too much, getting into fights. I was angry at the world, at God, at myself. It wasn't until I came to Agua Caliente that something changed. The work, the land, the people, they helped me find purpose again. And the letter today, Penelope prompted gently. From my mother, Gabriel said. My father died last month, heart failure. She wants me to come home, to take my place as head of the family. Penelope's heart sank. Will you go? Gabriel turned to look at her fully, his eyes clear and certain. No, I wrote back immediately to tell her so. My life is here now with you, with the ranch we're building together. I'm not that Boston banker's son anymore. I'm Gabriel Addison, rancher of Agua Caliente, Arizona Territory, and soon to be your husband. Relief washed through Penelope. I would have understood if you felt you needed to go. I know you would have, Gabriel said, touching her cheek tenderly. That's one of the reasons I love you, but there's nothing for me in Boston anymore. Everything I want is right here. The depth of feeling in his words moved Penelope deeply. Thank you for telling me, she said. For trusting me with your past. No more secrets between us, Gabriel promised. Though I do have one more surprise. He stood, offering her his hand. Come with me. He led her to a small outbuilding near the main house that Penelope had assumed was a tool shed. Opening the door, Gabriel revealed a space filled with bookshelves of them lining the walls from floor to ceiling. My books, he explained as Penelope gazed around in wonder. I had them shipped from storage in Boston. I couldn't bring myself to sell them, even in my darkest days. I thought perhaps they could form the beginning of a proper library for the school. Penelope ran her fingers along the leather-bound spines, recognizing classics of literature, history volumes, scientific texts, a collection worth a small fortune. Gabriel, this is incredible. The children will benefit from these for years to come. I thought we might keep some here as well, Gabriel suggested. For our own children when the time comes. The casual mention of their future family sent warmth spreading through Penelope. I'd like that very much. As December arrived, wedding preparations consumed much of Penelope's free time. The entire town seemed involved in some way, from Mrs. Thompson overseeing the decoration of the church to the Ladies' Aid Society planning the reception that would follow. Penelope had written to her parents about her engagement, not expecting much response. They had been cool to her decision to move west, and she assumed they would be equally disapproving of her marrying a rancher. To her surprise, they sent a package containing her grandmother's lace veil and a brief note expressing their wish for her happiness. The wedding day dawned clear and crisp, the desert winter at its most beautiful. As Penelope prepared in a room at the hotel, assisted by Mrs. Thompson and several other women from town, she felt a sense of rightness that calmed any nerves. Her dress, ordered from a catalog and altered by the town's seamstress, was elegant in its simplicity, ivory satin with lace accents, designed to complement her grandmother's veil. Her honey blonde hair was arranged in a crown of braids beneath the veil, with a few soft curls framing her face. "You look radiant, my dear," Mrs. Thompson said, adjusting the veil one final time. "Mr. Addison is a fortunate man." "I'm the fortunate one," Penelope replied, her heart full. Mayor Thompson arrived to escort her to the church, taking the place of her absent father. As they waited at the church entrance for the music to signal their entrance, he patted her hand where it rested on his arm. "Agua Caliente has been blessed by your presence, Miss Norton," he said sincerely. "And now Mr. Addison is equally blessed." The music began, and the church doors opened to reveal an interior transformed by evergreen boughs and red ribbons for Christmas. The pews were filled with townsfolk, students, and ranch hands, all turning to watch as Penelope began her walk down the aisle. At the altar stood Gabriel, more handsome than Penelope had ever seen him in a new suit. His eyes never left her as she approached, his expression one of awe and love that made her heart swell with joy. When Mayor Thompson placed her hand in Gabriel's, the connection between them was palpable. The ceremony itself was a blur of emotions and promises, culminating in the exchange of simple gold bands and Reverend Clark's pronouncement that they were husband and wife. Gabriel's kiss was gentle but filled with promise, appropriate for a church setting but leaving no doubt of his feelings. As they turned to face their friends and neighbors as Mr. and Mrs. Addison, Penelope felt a sense of completion she had never known before. The reception at the town hall was a joyous affair, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed twice the number of guests. Everyone wanted to congratulate the new couple, and Penelope found herself moved by the genuine affection the town showed them both. Even Vera Reynolds made an appearance, her congratulations stiff but civil. Penelope hoped that in time, the woman might find her own happiness and let go of whatever feelings she had harbored for Gabriel. As the celebration continued, Gabriel drew Penelope aside for a moment of privacy. "Happy, Mrs. Addison?" he asked, his eyes crinkling with the smile she had come to love. "Completely," Penelope assured him, relishing the sound of her new name. "Though I think I might need some time to get used to being called Mrs. Addison." "We have a lifetime for that," Gabriel replied, bringing her hand to his lips. That night, they stayed at the hotel in Agua Caliente, in the best room available. Their true wedding trip would come in the summer, when the school was not in session, but this one night of luxury was Gabriel's gift to his bride. As husband and wife, they discovered each other with tenderness and passion, learning together the physical expression of the love they shared. For Penelope, it was a revelation, this joining of bodies and hearts, and Gabriel's gentle guidance made the experience beautiful beyond her expectations. Afterward, lying in her husband's arms, Penelope reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the quicksand that might have claimed her life to the love that had given her a new one, every step had led her exactly where she was meant to be. "What are you thinking about?" Gabriel asked, his voice lazy with contentment. "How strange life is," Penelope replied, tracing patterns on his chest. "If I hadn't fallen into that quicksand, if you hadn't been riding by at that exact moment." "I believe we would have found each other anyway," Gabriel said, kissing the top of her head. "Some things are simply meant to be." Penelope smiled against his skin. "Perhaps you're right, but I'm grateful it happened the way it did." "As am I," Gabriel agreed. "Though I could have done without the terror of seeing you sinking into that mud." They fell asleep in each other's arms, husband and wife, their future stretching before them like the vast Arizona sky full of promise, challenge, and endless possibility. Spring came to Agua Caliente with an explosion of desert wildflowers, turning the normally brown landscape into a riot of color. Penelope continued teaching at the school while helping Gabriel establish their ranch. They named it Sunrise Ranch for the spectacular views of the eastern horizon from their front porch. By summer, Gabriel had resigned his position as foreman at the Double R, focusing entirely on their own operation. They started with a small herd of cattle purchased from Mr. Reynolds and a few quality horses that Gabriel was training himself. Their wedding trip was a 2-week journey to San Francisco, a city that amazed them both with its energy and growth. They visited bookshops, museums, and the theater, enjoying the cultural offerings while confirming that their hearts truly belonged in the simpler surroundings of Agua Caliente. Upon their return, Penelope discovered she was expecting their first child. The news brought Gabriel to his knees, his hands gentle on her still flat stomach, his voice breaking as he thanked her for this newest gift. Their son, Thomas William Addison, was born the following February, a healthy, robust baby with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined spirit. Penelope took a brief leave from teaching but returned when Tommy was 3 months old, bringing him with her to school, where he became a favorite with the students. As the years passed, the Addisons' family grew. A daughter, Elizabeth Rose, joined them 2 years after Tommy, followed by another son, Michael James, 3 years later. Each child was welcomed with joy, each adding new dimensions to Penelope and Gabriel's love. Sunrise Ranch prospered under Gabriel's careful management, expanding gradually but steadily. Penelope continued teaching until the school grew large enough to require multiple teachers, at which point she took on the role of headmistress, overseeing curriculum and training new educators who came to Agua Caliente. The town itself grew along with the Addison family, becoming a respectable settlement with amenities that would have seemed impossible when Penelope first arrived. The railroad came through in 1883, bringing new opportunities and connecting them more directly to the wider world. Through it all, Gabriel and Penelope remained at the heart of the community, their partnership a model of what love and respect could build. They faced challenges: droughts, cattle thieves, financial setbacks, but always as a team, drawing strength from each other and from the life they had created together. On their 20th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch of their expanded home watching their children play in the yard, Gabriel took Penelope's hand in his. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Leaving Philadelphia, marrying a rough cowboy, building a life in this harsh land." Penelope looked at her husband, the years having added silver to his temples but none of it diminishing his handsome features or the love in his eyes. "Never," she said with complete conviction. "This is exactly where I was meant to be, with you, with our children, with this life we've made." Gabriel's smile was as warm as it had been the day she met him. "Who would have thought that Quicksand would lead to all this?" "It pulled me down," Penelope replied, leaning her head against his shoulder. "But you pulled me out and into your life, and I have been grateful every day since." As the sun set over Sunrise Ranch, painting the sky in the colors that had given their home its name, Gabriel and Penelope Addison held hands and watched their children, their legacy, their future. From a chance encounter on a dusty creek bed had grown a love as vast and enduring as the Arizona sky above them, proving that sometimes the most difficult beginnings can lead to the most beautiful endings.